what does it mean to be pro-Israel? People like make this binary distinction between you're pro-Israel or pro-Palestine. Can't you be like, you have criticisms of Israel? I know that because you've debated pro-Israelis, like the IDF guy. So can you be pro-Israel and condemn the West Bank settlements or the blockade, just like you can be pro-America and be against the Iraq war, for example? Like, where do you like, you're pro-Israel. Do you condemn things that Israel's done, or what does that mean to you to be pro-Israel?
In my mind, and I really do think it all boils back to this, or boils down to this, regardless of what people know intuitively or not, and regardless of what people say. I think that being pro-Israel is kind of like being a Zionist. You're saying that I think that there ought to exist a country that is a state for Jewish people. I think that's what it means to be pro-Israel. And I would say that being anti-Israel is somebody that wants to fight on the concept of a Jewish nation, or a nation that can have a Jewish character enshrined in law. I think that's what it generally means to be pro or anti-Israel. And then people can nibble around the edges there, but I think that's really what we're getting at.
So you can still be critical of Israel and be pro-Israel.
I think that you absolutely must be, because if you're cheering on the West Bank settlements, you are cheering on the destruction of your country, I think. But,
So that's a good segue. What are the strongest criticisms against Israel, or how would you steelman the pro-Palestinian argument?
The steelman for the pro-Palestinian argument is the fact that Israel wants to live in both worlds. Israel wants to say, this is not an apartheid state, but we also have like a bunch of people living here, and we have no way of like actually solving, whatever issues are going on. And this isn't your country; it's our territory. And it's like, okay, well, listen, then it's apartheid. If you want to say that it's your country and we're just living here as your subjects, basically, then it's fucking apartheid. If you want to say it's not apartheid, then fine, it doesn't have to be apartheid. But then it's our country. Fuck you, leave. I think that the dual situation going on in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank needs to stop. That there has to be some agreement or settlement, and Israel needs to aggressively work towards that solution. If Abu Mazen isn't the guy to work with on that, figure it out. You have to figure this out. I don't care what you have to do. You have to figure it out. That's probably the biggest thing that needs to change.
Sorry, so you're saying that to steelman the pro-Palestinian argument, you're saying that Israel is trying to have it both ways, to say that they're not an apartheid state, but also to they do treat Palestinians differently, and they're saying it's not an apartheid state. So one of those things has to be.
Yeah,
is that what you're saying?
I would say, yeah. You can't have an indefinitely occupied territory. That's just a country with another name, or a part of your country with another name. You can't have it. It can't be indefinitely occupied. That's crazy. It's been like 60 years or something. Like, geez.
So is that and how would you respond to that how do you, without steelmanning the Palestinian argument, like how do you actually feel about that? What you just said.
Well, the Israeli argument is we've tried to. We've tried to negotiate with your leaders. Arafat wasn't interested. Every time, look at what that got us. That got us the second Intifada. Every time we try to negotiate with any sort of Palestinian leadership, it seems like there's either an Intifada, or if we pull out of an area, we just get more violence. We disengage from Lebanon after 2006, and it was after the end of the first Lebanon war. After Israel disengaged from that, you got the, I think in the 80s, right? They got Hezbollah when they disengaged from the Gaza Strip. They got, you got Hamas. What is the incentive that Israel has? Even in some of the Palestinian Authority, territories, some of the biggest bomb makers were, supposed to have been coming out of places like Ramallah and stuff during the Second Intifada. So Israel's like, well, when we leave places, we just get violence, and it doesn't seem like you guys are giving us any leaders that we can actually negotiate with, because every time we try to negotiate a peace plan, you guys never give us any solids, and things just get indefinitely, stalled until nothing happens. Yeah. And
could you steelman the broad? I mean, I feel like the more fundamental aspect of the pro-Palestinian argument is that the founding of Israel was unjust, right? That it necessarily expelled Palestinians. That was baked into Zionism.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, let me ask about that. So your debate on Lex with Finkelstein, one of the points he hung on was Benny Morris's book spent a while talking about that idea that expulsion was intrinsic to Zionism, and Benny Morris's response was like, hey, no, but it's a small part. It's not intrinsic, it's just a small part of it. In
No,
other
I don't think
words,
it was. I don't think that was Morris's response. The response was expulsion only became necessary once it was demonstrated that Arabs and Jews wouldn't be able to live peacefully, largely because the Arabs were violently resisting the mass transfer or the mass migration of Jewish people to the Levant. I think that was to the mandatory Palestine area. Once that started to become clear, after the terrorist attacks from Arabs to Jews, after all the violence of the 20s through the 30s, then it was like, yeah, okay, this isn't going to work anymore.
Then I misheard it. I thought Benny Morris did concede that yes, there is elements. Not that it's like the point of Zionism is for the Jewish people to find a homeland.
Mhm.
Like I'm with you on that. But Finkelstein's point that I thought Benny Morris conceded on was that they didn't agree on the significance of it, but I thought they both agreed that intrinsic to Zionism in some component was this idea of expulsion. Like it was maybe it was just in a diary or whatever, but
Well, I
it
mean,
was
there was,
there. Like it
yeah,
was
just
not. It was not there.
you have to be
Right?
careful which part you're talking about. To some extent, you're right. There's a name for this concept. It might just be called Jewish labor, but I think there's a more specific name for it. But when Jews buy land, they want to work that land with other Jewish people. That was like part of their, I think it might be called conquest for labor, Jewish conquest for labor, maybe. But yeah, in part of buying land in the Palestinian area, in the Levant, even under the Ottoman Empire, when Jews bought the land, they wanted to pay off the Arab farmers that worked there so that they would leave, and they didn't always want to leave, but they paid them the minimum payment and then they kicked them off. So that is true, but people will sometimes conflate that with statements made by either Kaisman or Ben Gurion about how transfer had become necessary or expulsion had become necessary. But this was after all the civil warring from Arabs to Jews had been going on. And then people will conflate that with whether or not Jews wanted to expel all the Arabs, like in the Nakba, that was that Plan Dalet, Plan D, that was planned from the very beginning. And this just happened out of nowhere, or not out of nowhere, but it was like a pre-planned ethnic cleansing. It had nothing to do with the war that was going on. So these three ideas get kind of like thrown around interchangeably. Yeah.
So I think what you're saying is like, yeah, there was this notion of like expulsion, but in the least malicious way possible.
There was expulsion, but in the hold
the
on.
notion, was the according to Finkelstein, Benny Morris wrote 25 pages about the idea that expulsion was there.
Mhm.
Okay. So I think what you're saying is, yeah, it was there, but it was not that malicious, or they're really talking about buying land.
They're talking
legally,
about, yes. In the beginning, they're talking about buying land and having only Jews work the land.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, like that's a lose-lose if you're Jewish, because let's say, for instance, Jews bought the land and had the Arabs work it. Well, people would just say that the Jews were like capitalist enslavers of Arabs anyway. So I mean, it's not like they could have won on that. But yeah, that initial part is. But the idea of buying all of Israel and evicting all the Arabs was built into Zionism from the start. That's not true.
Got it. So before I said, hey, Steelman, the pro-Palestinian argument, and I wanted you to kind of debate yourself on that. But rather than asking that again, I think what I'm curious is, can you tell me, not to Steelman anything, but tell me in sincerity, what are your biggest criticisms of Israel?
The West Bank settlements are horrible. That has to stop. It's just stupid. You're destroying your country by continuing to expand while inevitably putting off peace with Palestinians, while still playing to this Menachem Begin's idea of capsule theory, this idea that, well, we can just make peace with all the other people like they did with Egypt and Jordan, and we can do it with the Abraham Accords. We just ignore the Palestinians. It's so stupid. You have to stop ignoring the Palestinians. I can't believe they signed those Abraham Accords and moved the embassy and thought that they could just keep living life like these millions of people that are within your occupied borders aren't going to rise up against you. It's so stupid. That's so stupid and arrogant. Yeah.
So that would be, so, you call yourself pro-Israel, but I think there's a terminology problem that we experience, right? Tell me if you agree or not. But I feel like a lot of pro-Israel people probably, maybe they wouldn't concede as much, and likewise, you have people who are let me say this: you have people who are pro-Palestine who don't want to condemn Hamas because they feel like condemning Hamas is hurting their cause, is in some way deflecting the blame from the IDF to Hamas when they're really pissed off at Israel. And likewise, you have pro-Israeli people who won't condemn the West Bank settlements for the same reason. They feel like conceding on that point weakens their point. And I think it's the opposite. The more we concede, the stronger our argument, the more we can concede on points that are not essential to our argument, the stronger the argument becomes. Someone you and I both know said this to me recently, that if someone's trying to sell you a used car, and they say to you, listen, you should buy this car, but I gotta tell you, like the AC is busted, the window needs to be repaired, but the rest of it's great. Like, you're more likely to buy the car because you see that you trusted that person's being sincere because they're admitting all the problems in that case with the car. I think it's so important for people to be like you just did, for people to be able to concede and not just say, no, Israel's in the right all the time. And, the West Bank settlements are necessary because the land belongs to the Jews, because of the Bible, or because the war, whatever. Just a random thought I had. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I kind of agree. Yeah, I'm just because of where I'm at in the West and my position online. Like, I'm like the pro-Israel guy, but the reality is if you stick me in front of a Zionist, I'm going to come off as like a bleeding heart pro-Palestinian. Like I said, like, I'm grossly opposed to the settlements. I think that Israel needs to do a much better job at taking care of its Arab population. It's actually like phenomenal. The Palestinians that live in Israel, I didn't even realize until I was there. I was like, Jesus, you have 2 million. These are like the most primed to be fucking terrorist Muslims in the entire fucking planet. And they are amazing people. They don't do it. There was no third intifada on October 7th. Why don't you brag about these people more? But instead, Israel is locked down. They cut off all the work permits from the West Bank. They stopped buying services and stuff from Arab Palestinians that live in Israel. Like, Jesus, like, the fuck is wrong with you? Yeah, they're just like that. Those are huge mistakes, I think. When I did a show with, is it Ilan Levy? Is that a real person? That's the name, right?
There's Gideon Levy, who I spoke to.
Okay, Jewish people have like 4 last names. Okay, so that might be his name. Hold on. Yeah, it is. Or it might be Alon. I'm sorry, Alon Levy. I spoke to Alon, and I think when I went on his show, I think he thought, because when we were speaking in the car, I was very critical of the Palestinian narrative side of things, because I am. I think there's a lot of really dumb stuff over there. But when I went on it,
Levy's one last name. Just saying.
Yeah. What about it?
You said you have 4 last names.
Oh no, I meant there's like 4 or 5 different like last names, like total. Like, it feels like,
you're saying right. Yeah. Levy's the big one. Cohen, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then first names too. Yeah, lots of Ariels, lots of Shlomos, lots of yeah. But I think when he brought me on his podcast, on his Israeli podcast, he was the guy that was the old spokesman for the Israeli something. He was the eyebrow guy on TV. But anyway, when he brought me on, I think he was expecting me to just be like full, like, yeah, let's go Israel. But he started to hammer home a lot of those big pro-Zionist, like very far right points. And I'm like, hold on, we're going to argue about all of this. I don't agree with any of this. And I think I came off as like very pro-Palestinian on that podcast. There were a lot of like very Zionist people that were very upset at me being there. And I don't think that he was thinking that was going to happen at the start. Yeah.
I think that nuance is so essential, and I think it's a problem with how people reason. Tell me what if you agree, and this also pertains to Trump and politics. It's like whatever side you take, people often have a hard time being either seeing the flaws with that point of view or being willing to express them.
Yeah, I think it happens sometimes. Right? Yeah, because your side is fully good and the other side is fully bad, so admitting faults is really hard or impossible.
And then it makes you seem insincere. So, for example, the pro-Israel people who do not concede on the West Bank settlement, and they don't think there's a problem with that, if someone heard them speak, they'd say, "Wow, pro-Israel people are terrible. Mm-hmm. They don't care about Palestinians. They think the West Bank settlements are a good thing. Mm-hmm. It must be evil to have the pro-Israeli view." So I think it's the distinction so essential. Yeah. What else? What other criticisms do you have with Israel? You said taking care of the Arab population, the West Bank settlements. How about the blockade?
I think the blockade is understandable, but the blockade has to go now after this war. Because remember, the reason for the blockade was to prevent bad things from getting into an area that was controlled by Hamas. But if you're going to stay here and you're going to, execute this war up to the destruction of all of Hamas, even if that means you've got to blow up, half the Gaza Strip to do it, fine, have your war. I think it was just to start the war. And I even think the way in which they've carried it out is generally okay, although with some criticisms. But